That's what I look like.
I'm sorry. There's something we can do about it.
It is what it is now.
You're lit up pretty well. I mean, I always look ugly, so
Again, things we can't change.
I know. So we're going to do skull games, a little bit of skull games.
Listen, we're winging the whole thing. That's what it's supposed to be, right? It should be honest. Should just be, not scripted.
Well, not overly scripted. Obviously, there's like
We have a guide.
things we talk about.
Yeah.
The 3 biggest passions: the success and well-being of your children, the quest to strengthen your relationship with God, and making a difference in the lives of your clients. Do you want to start with 3 John 1:4?
Sure.
I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Why do you like that quote over, some other stuff? It's like the first thing that you thought of when I asked, what kind of quotes do you like?
So there's a couple things behind that. One has to do with children, right? So it's important for me that scripture speaks to me. Are we rolling here? Or are we? Oh, so that scripture speaks to me twofold. One, because it speaks to children, right? So as I grow older, it's amazing for me to see each of my children's walk in their faith. Some similarly, but also different independently. But the key word in that whole thing is walk, right? Is for me is symbolic of not just having faith, but actually how they live their daily lives and actually have purpose, and live out their faith in the things they do, the relationships they have. So it's actionable, right? It's not just saying I believe. It's not just going to church. It's not just, there's purpose behind it. That's what's important.
Yeah, there's a big difference in believing something and just knowing something.
And doing something.
Yeah.
Right. And at least in my belief system, as much as I try to do it, as much as I stumble, more than I probably succeed, it's a path. It's that walking, right? The actual line of scripture says, I have no greater joy, which is happiness that's immeasurable and beyond just being happy, right? My greatest joy is to know that my children walk in the truth, right? They're living their daily lives or the best of their ability in support and in good conscience of their faith, not just saying I believe.
How would you say, you briefly touched on it, but what would you say your definition of joy is?
There's happiness, which to me is a temporary feeling of things that happen, right? I can help a client. We close a deal. We go to the range and we hit the bullseye, right?
It's a short-term spurt of...
It's a short-term and easily gone feeling. Joy's eternal, right? So I went to visit my son this past weekend, right? And so my first grandchild, my baby granddaughter Eliana, was born in November. And I go down to, visit them, and I walk in their house and I see her, and that's joy, right? That's a feeling beyond happiness of something that will last a lifetime. And joy is also, again, for me, is a spiritual thing, right? It's a connection and a level of happiness that exceeds something temporal.
There's a discipline part of it.
What are the things that drive you to do the things that you do? Why do you work hard? Right. Okay. Well, there are financial reasons for that. But there are meanings that are much greater, certainly in my life now, that you work hard for. Right. In creating joy, I mean, I can buy a nice car. That's not joy for me. Right. I can go have a nice meal with good friends and family and so forth. Right. Well, the enjoyment of that meal and the time spent with friends and family and so forth is a block of time that will be happy, right? I'll enjoy that meal, and I'm going to enjoy it for a short period of time, and the company's going to be great. And then tomorrow, a new day starts, and there's nothing lasting beyond that time spent that's necessarily joyful, right? But memories are joyful. Good memories are joyful, right? Things watching my children succeed, personally, professionally, spiritually, at the top of the list, really, create joy. That's the difference for me.
So you would prefer experience over material things?
without question, right? And as much as I can remember, the things that we do, it's yes, experience way beyond material. Now, that's not to say that I don't like material things. I have a terrible habit of buying cars at the wrong time, and spending money probably on things that I don't need to spend money on. Those things don't give me joy; they give me happiness. And then I will, maybe another way to look at that is how I look at things in retrospect. Right, I can look at something I've purchased or had the wherewithal to buy, and maybe did, and it gave me happiness for a period of time, and look back on it and go, man, I didn't really need to do that. The things that bring you joy, you never regret.
So what about, so you have the material things and then you have the experiences, memories that you have. How would that tie into your motivation versus your discipline?
So,
because you have the material things that are kind of like short term. It's like you get it and you get that little like dopamine high and everything, which almost sounds like motivation. Like it's something that sparks that little more like that end result motivation. Like I finally have accomplished something. But then there's also like the experiences of everything that you learned to get to that point, which I would say is, or in my opinion, is like, that's the discipline. Like the discipline got you to that materialistic thing. You got it. It became that motivation, and then motivation to do another thing that gives you that discipline.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I also look at it a little bit differently in that if I look at things, if you look at using your comparison of motivation versus discipline, right? So things that also, I'm going to use the joy happiness comparison again. Things that also bring me joy are bringing happiness to other people, right? So, and that could be a client, that could be family, that could be friends, picking up a tab for a nice bottle of wine or a meal or something like that. So I like to create happiness whenever I can. I'd like to bring happiness to people I care about. The discipline are the things that you do to allow yourself to create that, right? So, what are the things that I do? It's mechanical almost, right? The things that I do on a regular basis, the things I do, things how I follow up with, prospective clients, things I do in my daily life to make sure that I'm a calendar freak, right? So I have to make sure that my day is mapped out, right? So if it's not my calendar, it may not happen. But I need that discipline to make sure that I'm, one, on time for things, that two, I'm prepared for things, and doing everything I can to make sure that the outcome as a result of that discipline ends up as not every time, but ends up the way I hope it will.
I've always said I hate routines, but I love consistency. You said that you always need to map out your calendar. I'm more on the spectrum of, if I have my calendar free, it allows me, like, I know what I want to get done, but it gives me that flexibility to say that if something doesn't feel right to do right now, I could do something else. Like if I don't feel like editing, just because I'm like my mind's still editing the movie in my head, I could do something more like operational side. Does having like a full out calendar give you that discipline, or give you the structure to be able to keep that consistency?
It does for me.
Okay.
And I work in a very competitive transactional business, right? So, as you know, I'm in the residential lending world, right? So there are a lot of people, especially in this market, who do what I do, right? There are a lot of loan officers, there are a lot of people, and we have I like to consider it a commoditized business, right? I mean, when people are looking to buy a home or build a home, maybe even refinance their mortgage, there's a lot of people. It's okay. Well, most of us offer, for the most part, the same thing at pretty much the same price, right? So how do you differentiate yourself? So I have to be available, but I also have to plan to be available. So what the calendar does for me and the structure does for me, because I need structure, I need to schedule appointments that I know I can give my undivided attention to a client who probably has 1,000 questions, and be able to give that time and counsel and educate and coach. Right, because that's it for me. That's a differentiator. I'm on a tangent here, but in order for me to be the best version of me for someone who needs my attention, and to give them the undivided time that they need to get the best of me, I need to plan for that. Right, I need to make sure that, you know what, if you're available from 10 to 11 on Thursday morning, I'm giving you that time. and everything else is pushed to the side. If I don't do that, it's a lot harder for me to just answer the phone every time it rings, right? Now I'll get back to you immediately, but I have to live that way. I have to make sure that, and also for balance, right? Work-home balance has always been a very difficult thing, and so in as much as I need to give my business and the clients of that business as much time and effort and energy as I can, I need to give that same time and effort and energy to home.
With your family, with the people that you love.
Yeah. And it doesn't always work out that way. And for years that was kind of a bone of contention, right? I want to make sure I'm pouring into my family. I want to make sure if I'm coaching that I'm that's uninterrupted and giving time. And in the real estate and mortgage world, most people are, they also have jobs, right? So they're also busy and active in trying to do their home purchasing things or home building things when they're off work, right? They're available to talk at 8 p.m. They're available to talk at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning, right? So sometimes you have to do that, but the calendar gives me the opportunity, the option to decide if I'm going to take that call or that meeting or what have you at that time. But if I say yes, you're going to get the best of me.
So that actually goes really well to the main purpose of the conversation, or the main overall subject, which is that you're really good at making value-based relationships over transactional relationships. So I just wanted to see if do you have a definition of what a transactional relationship looks like versus a value-based relationship towards clients, but also in your family and as well to yourself?
So I think some of those intercede to some degree, right? And so from a business standpoint, that's easy. For me, it's again going back to the commoditization of our business and how there's so many people basically doing the same thing, right? When people call in, when people are buying a home or getting a mortgage, what they're most interested in are okay, well, what's my interest rate? What's my monthly payment going to be? Can you beat this rate? Can you, so forth and so on. All of that. Our business is so transactional, and most people who are looking to buy, quote unquote, the product that I'm offering, value for them is cost. Right? It's interest rate, it's monthly payment, it's closing costs, right? That's because they don't know me just as much as they don't know, I've been probably recommended by someone, but we don't have a relationship yet, right? Me and the client, right? So their value system is based on cost, right? So how do you turn that into value, right? Or how do you turn value into something other than cost, right? So it's building trust. It's actually being empathetic and sympathetic to a situation, right? It's listening versus talking. It's, good relationships are built over time, right? I'm trying to build a relationship in about 10 minutes. There's value in those qualities and listening and showing empathy to a situation, to guiding someone down a path that even if I'm not necessarily providing the cheapest rate or the cheapest terms, being willing to say in some cases, you know what, if that's what you're being offered, then take it, even though it's not with me, because the best thing you can do is what's right for you and your family. And many times those folks come back because they appreciate the fact that you were honest and trustworthy. But in many cases, there are situations, a lot of what we do in this business have to do with folks who are building a home or doing a large scale renovation or something that is unique to them, because most people that I work with in that space have never done it before, right? They might have built a home in a neighborhood, right? With what we call production builders, right? You put a deposit down, the builder builds your home, and then you get your mortgage at the end when the house is built. We work with a lot of folks who need a loan to build their home, and that's unique for people. And so there's a lot about that process that's unique to them. And so where we end up creating value is by coaching, by teaching, by providing people a true understanding about what they're going to get into, how it works, how it differentiates from getting a traditional loan, so that there are no surprises, right? So they know exactly what to expect from the moment they fill out their loan application until the time that the last draw is paid and they're moving into their home.
When you were talking about giving people value, I kind of always remember the one thing is whenever someone's trying to get into something, they try to hide whatever, like their trade secrets kind of, that They don't want other people to know about it, which like for mass manufacturers like Intel or massive companies, of course there are trade secrets, but just like everything that I'm doing here, I could tell someone about it, but they don't have the same skills that I have in order to actually implement it. So in a way, what do you do to make sure that what like your education doesn't turn against you?
You've done this enough times now where you've had a conversation with someone, or you're doing your prep work, and somebody says something and you know the response without even having to think about it, right? Your brain has been structured or just built over time to know exactly what to say, when to say it, as soon as you hear something. That's exactly how this works, right? And I have coached and counseled and taught and educated enough people over the years, specifically in mortgage or construction financing in particular, that although it's real and I'm being honest and true, I don't have to think about it much anymore. Those answers are natural responses because probably 80 to 90% of them are the same answers that, that I've said over the years for people. How do you plan for this? What are things you should be considering? Not just this is what our rate is, this is how much it's going to cost you, here's what your monthly payment's going to be, right? And one of the reasons I really enjoy this piece of our business is that, and going back to the transactional versus relationship part of the business, yes, mortgages are very transactional. If you come to me to buy a home and need a loan, I'm going to quote you a rate, I'm going to quote you a payment, we're going to gather all your documents, you're going to close on your home, and you probably don't need to see me again for several years, right? When we help somebody build a home, we're just getting started when they close the loan, because now we're going to have this relationship for the next 8, 10, 12 months plus maybe as your home is being built, right? And so it's one of the things that I love about what I do, particularly as it relates to that part of the business, is I'm in a transactional business and I hate transactions, right? I look at the builder, lender, client relationship as like this three-legged stool, right? The stool will not stand without all three of us working in concert with one another. So, and so how do I provide value to that particular client? Well, I'm not your builder, but having had the experience that I have over the years, here are some things you probably should consider. It's not a trade secret thing, right? I know enough about my business that, and about what you're planning to do, that I don't care. I really don't care who comes to me and asks me what I know about it or how to educate people. Because truthfully, I'm not going to do this forever. And I really hope that the next generation of people who come in and do what I do it the same way or better, right? Because people deserve that, right? They deserve people who are going to be honest with them. They deserve trustworthiness. And I'm hopeful that when I talk to people, that comes out. Because, I know I'm going to do, I know God's going to provide, and I know I'm going to do the business that he intends for me to do.
Would you say that when you first started, you were trying to be effective, and then at this point, you just become really efficient in what you do?
I definitely want to be efficient, but I don't want to lose, if I'm answering your question the right way, I don't want to lose the importance of connection just by being efficient, right? Some clients need 10 minutes to answer the questions they want to answer, or they want to have answered, and get the information they think they need, and don't want to dive in, have any more time to talk about it. Some people need an hour and a half.
Would you say that a lot of people, depending on their perception of money, will either require more or less time to get a transaction or get a...
People don't know what they don't know, right? So anybody who's going to talk about buying a product, a service, what have you, already have their preconceived notions about what they think they need to know. So a lot of times those conversations start with me asking a few numbers questions, right? Okay, so what are you looking to do? How much do you think you want to spend? Do you have an existing mortgage now? If you bought a piece of land, do you owe anything on it, right? I'm trying to basically just encapsulate a starting point, right? Because we can't start the race until we at least get in the starting blocks, right? So, and then what often happens is that conversation just evolves into a conversation about things they haven't even thought about yet, right? They know they need to ask certain questions, cost, price, rate, all that kind of stuff. How do I get qualified? All that kind of stuff. The better and more the more meaningful, deeper conversations come as a result of bring about, probably, think about like my son ran the 400 when he was in high school, right? So nothing really happens meaningful until you get the first 200 yards out of the way, right? So now those first 200 yards, you're kind of setting the tone, you're setting the stage, right? You're seeing where things stand and so forth. And the last 200 yards of that race is where the pack separates, right? That last 200 yards of my race is where we're really having the most in-depth, meaningful conversation to create a potential solution based on someone's unique circumstances, right? And I think, when I think about a race, right? So in that last 200 yards, I think a lot of the rest of the pack is still sitting back here because they're not asking clients the right questions. They're not asking, not even necessarily have to be a work thing, but right in terms of business, they may not be asking their clients the right questions, or asking about what's important to them. That's where the meaningful conversations happen. Getting into the why, not just the what.
Is there a balance between giving someone too much information where it like overwhelms them and their brain kind of shuts down, and then giving them the same amount of information, but doing it in a way that they can process it easier so they start to build trust with you?
It's interesting. I was at a seminar years ago, and one of the things that this guy was talking about was how people learn, right? And there are 3 ways that people absorb information. It's either visual. I'm on the phone. I don't have that ability. People learn visually, or auditory, or kinesthetic, right? So now if I'm up on a stage and I'm trying to connect with people, I have the ability to do all 3. If I'm a visual teacher, or if I'm a visual learner, I'm going to respond to somebody who's up walking around the stage and moving, right? If I'm an auditory learner, that guy needs to stand pretty still because I'm only responding to what I hear, right? But if I'm a kinesthetic learner, right, I respond to how what you say makes me feel, right? So I only get at most on the phone 2 out of 3 because certainly post-COVID, we don't physically meet with as many people as we used to. Maybe a Zoom call or a Teams call or something like that where we get to sort of meet face to face. So I have to do what I can to try to understand. I'm going to pour into people as much as I can. So when it comes to information, we need to stop and I will stop in a conversation and say, listen, and I probably said this more often than not, I know I've dumped a lot of information on you, and I will tend to ramble about this because I'm passionate about it and I love what I do. What questions do you have at the moment? And hopefully, I'll even encourage people, write stuff down. As we get talking, write some stuff down. By the end of that meeting, call, whatever the case might be most people will say, thank you. I know a lot more about this now than I either knew before or I expected to know. That's the feedback I need. And people will then hopefully, which I encourage them to do, follow up with questions afterward. Like, listen, I may not respond to you at 11 o'clock at night. In fact, I probably won't. But I will guarantee you that you're probably going to go to sleep tonight and you're going to pop up in bed at 11:30 at night and go, oh, I wish I would have asked him this. Write it down, or if your phone's next to your bed, send me an email and I'll respond to it tomorrow. Right. I don't think people, when you're making the largest financial investment that you've ever made, I don't think there's such a thing as having too much information. It's having the right information, right? So you can make the most conscientious decision you can possibly make.
There's one thing that you've mentioned multiple times already, so I wanted to get your definition. What would you define honesty as?
Well, speaking the truth would certainly be the easiest way.
Like the deeper meaning of honesty.
Knowing that you gave whoever's on the other end, right? Your client, your referral partner, your business associate, your significant other, your children, rest of your family, everything that you have to give them, whether that message is good news or bad news or indifferent news, that you gave them everything you had with an open heart and open mind, and knowing that I could look up spiritually and know I did the right thing.
And what about the internal conflict? When you have to give someone the honest news, but you know it's going to hurt them, even if it's the right thing to do, even though it's something that will make them a better person, you have to do it because, like, especially I know, like, or I've heard when you're raising children that when you're first raising them, you're not their friend. You're the parent. You're the one showing them the good things to do, the bad things to do, or the bad things to avoid.
Let them fail. Absolutely, let them fail. Right. I mean, I say this certainly not as a perfect parent, certainly not as a perfect spouse. We all make mistakes. We're all broken. When I speak of that from a spiritual perspective, we're all broken. We all make mistakes. But none of us, especially our children, learn from making decisions for them, or protecting them from failure. Failure is the best thing that they can go through. Right. And then, because now I have the foundation to work off of to help them learn to not do that again. Right. So, no, I don't want to, I want to protect my children from harm and from making colossal mistakes. Right. And that certainly comes through parenting, right? And just guidance and avoidance of things and so forth. I'm heartbroken to have to deliver bad news of something that went wrong, or I'm heartbroken when they have to come to me now because my children are adults with something that went wrong or something they made a bad decision about. But yet there's a piece of me that's like, okay, you can't not do something wrong again unless you do it wrong the first time.
So it's something that's both on the parent side and the child side, the humility over pride.
No question. Right. And I have to be humble in those circumstances. Right. And I'm just, in my brain, you're just thinking through circumstances of things where could they have done something different? Sure. But in a way, I'm glad that they did it the wrong way. Right. Because they will achieve happiness and eventually joy. Right. And they will appreciate when they end up getting a different result. They're going to, it's our insanity quote, right? They're going to eventually appreciate the accomplishment of doing something the right way, having done it wrong before.
Like there's only so much, there's things that you can teach them, and then there's things that they have to teach themselves, or they have to learn from making the mistakes themselves.
No question. That's one of the great things about baseball. And it's one of the reasons I love coaching baseball. If you can fail 7 out of 10 times that you reach the plate and be a Hall of Famer, right? Think about that, right? Hall of Fame hitters, right? Major League Baseball Hall of Famers have 300-ish averages, right? That means you failed 7 out of every 10 times that you reach the plate, right? There is no better sport in my mind that, first, it's slow. You have, compared to other sports like basketball and football, right, where you don't have time to dwell on your mistakes. Baseball, you have all the time in the world to dwell on your mistakes, right? So you have to be mentally tough to overcome that and be ready for the next play.
A lot of the times, starting something new or continuing something that you love, there's always something or two things or multiple things over. Like you could have like the best of times, like everything's really peachy, like you just get into that flow state, you work, and it's like, it's fascinating. And then all of a sudden one thing starts happening and two things start happening, more things. And then there's more, like I'll find myself eventually getting to the point where I'm focusing so much on the failure of what could be rather than focusing on what I can do to get around that failure. So how do you handle the fear of failure?
It's my greatest fear. It is absolutely my greatest fear. And I know it's my greatest fear. Do you ever have any recurring dreams?
Baby.
All right. Well, so for years I've had, off and on I've had this, and it's all, it's different variations of it, but I've had this recurring dream that I'm like 6 credits from graduating college and I don't get there, right? Like I didn't take the right class, or I'm not able to get to class on time to take it.
It's like you've done 4 years of college and
I'm this close. Wait. And I can't finish. Right, I can't finish the race. As said in 2 Timothy, I fought the good fight. Right, I finished the race, and I can't finish the race. Right, so I know that is a failure, as a fear of failure thing. Right, and yet, as successful as I've been, I like to think, I like to pray that I've been fairly successful as a dad, right? I like to think that I know I've been successful in business. There's nothing when I'm conscious and awake that's telling me I should be afraid to fail. And yet I know it's something in my subconscious and I don't know if that's the competitive nature in me. Our business certainly is very competitive and it's all, and certainly it's a numbers thing, right? Are you the best version of yourself? Are you the best in the business? Are you, it's all about production, right? And because we are, and I'd imagine most people that do what I do are 100% commission, right? So you eat what you kill, right? So in one way, no one else is defining my worth, right? I'm defining my worth. And the more business I do, the more I'll get paid. But sometimes you have an off month, right? Sometimes you may not produce anything. Well, guess what? You don't get paid. So now to equate that with failure may not be fair, because over the long haul, you've been successful, but it's always in there, right? But I don't let fear dictate how I run my life. I don't let fear dictate how I approach my business.
Would you say like a lot of the lack of fear that you have is because of the people that you know, because of your children, because of the relationships you have, that like there's all these people counting on you and now you just have to count on yourself?
I forget who said it. I just heard a quote the other day that I thought was perfect, that the only way to achieve your greatest success is to surround yourself with successful people, right?
The five closest people to you will define who you are.
Yeah. I mean, it's something along those lines. The only way I'm going to learn at 55 at this point in my business is, I can constantly evolve, right? I want to find people that are doing what I'm doing better, right? And learn from them. I also learn from the opportunities that I didn't get. Sometimes that's things I can't control. I can't control what other lenders offer in terms of rates and fees and all that kind of stuff. But if I ever lose an opportunity because I wasn't at my best or somebody provided better service, that's a learning experience, right? So who's doing that better than me, right? Who do I surround myself with in my daily life, right? And are they the best version? Are they pouring into me, right? And I love being the one pouring into. If I'm able to pour into somebody spiritually, right? As my faith has grown, that's something I strive to do when I can. Am I pouring into my family? Am I pouring into my friends? Am I being someone that people can rely upon? That's important to me. But sometimes you need that back, right? And I'm the guy. So I'm the guy that just takes those like when I'm frustrated or down about something, I just shove it down, right? So a lot of times people don't know if I'm dealing with something, right? So because I want to shove that down, and what do you need? What can I help you with? Right? And that's not always healthy. But if you surround yourself with those five, right? If you surround yourself with like your super, super close friends and your kids, right? Your family, and those that are really, really close to you should know anyway, right? They can see it. They can see it in your eyes. They can hear it in your voice.
One recurring thing that keeps going on in my mind is that, so one quote, you don't want to be the smartest. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. But at the same time, as you were talking, it kind of like there was an additional sentence that came into my mind that you can be the smartest person. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you want to be able to pull everyone else that is worth helping into that room with you, so they can be exposed to the same things that you want to be exposed to.
No question. And I don't want to be, what was the Oscar Wilde quote? Be yourself because everybody else is already taken, right? There's something about being, and this goes back to your question about honesty, right? Being authentic is, I think, such a difference maker, both personally and professionally. Like if people know that you're being authentic, like I don't want to be anybody else. Now, when I was younger and I saw people being super successful in my business and so forth, like, oh, I want to be like that guy. Oh, I want to own my own business. Oh, I want to make all that money and so forth. I don't want to be him. I don't want to be her. I want to be me.
But you'll take the best parts of those people and make it into who you want to be.
Yes, I want to take the best parts of those people and hopefully then mold something that allows me to be a better version of myself. I think there's a lot of awesome things about people that I've come into contact with over the last several years, people that are super close to me. Even folks that I've strived to improve their business, like Jeff Teagues, right, at Skull Games. I mean, there are people that have come across in my world that I admire. I don't want to be Jeff. I don't want to ever have gone through what Jeff went through. But I admire, and hopefully there are parts of that I glean from Jeff that I want to employ potentially, and other people in my life that I want to employ to continue to be a better version of myself, right? To continue to grow and be authentic, right? And hopefully somebody out there one day says, man, I want to be like that guy.
I want to go into Skull Games a little more, but there was one thing I wanted to mention. I wouldn't say like everyone I meet, but there's a lot of people that I meet who are either trying to find like a mentor or someone, or they already have like a mentor, someone that they like always go to for advice for like this person is my mentor. They're going to guide me through life or whatever. And while that's admirable and everything, I've always found that, and this is something that Dave's talked about, and he says it more in the jiu-jitsu sense, but I'm going to like paraphrase, that no one person will have everything that you need.
No question. And sometimes you don't know who your best mentors were until it's in the rearview mirror, right? My father was a great mentor as it relates to discipline. He was a very stoic, disciplined man. I'm very grateful that he didn't treat me the way his father treated him. But he was the worker. He was the one that was, he was the provider. He was very, very disciplined. And yet my mother was the kind of, I say life of the party, but she was the one that everybody all my friends in the neighborhood loved. And she was, they were clear, there was absolute opposite, right? She was the outgoing, friendly, personable, laughable, so forth. And so I learned a lot from both of them. But in terms of how I operate business, how I work, the discipline, the follow up and all that kind of stuff, that's definitely a dad mentorship thing. I've had coaches that were mentors. I've had friends that were mentors. There's certainly people in my business that were mentors. And oddly enough, as your kids get older, they teach you things as well. Because not only do they remind you of things that you did when you were their age, but how they overcome adversity in many cases is admirable. And there's sort of a mentorship there, right? It's like the student becoming the teacher to some degree.
It's funny how the most honest people that I know are either the really old people who know they don't have much time left, or the really young people who haven't had enough time to get hurt by the world.
Well, I'm right in the middle. So, probably leaning towards the really old side, but but I mean, I get more joy out of imparting wisdom, because I do have a lot of life experience, right? Just as much bad as good. So that's a lot where that joy comes from. And for me, I think when I was sharing with you earlier, I'm about to get back on the baseball field, and I haven't coached in a while, but I'm excited about it. And that's a place for me where I can do that, right? And you have 15 to 18, well, to start out, it's going to be 14 to 15, but eventually like 14 to 15 to 18-year-old kids that are impressionable. And some are looking for guidance. Some are looking for friendship. Some are looking for a father figure, right? And I don't necessarily need to do one or any of those things, but coaching has always been something for me that has allowed me to pour into the younger generation, and over time, hopefully, see the impact, right? I have a sign that I was coaching several years ago, and at the end of the season, a lot of these kids were now at a level of high school where they're starting to go to like these showcase teams and trying to get themselves looks for college and so forth. And so this team was starting to break up, and one of these young men gave me a gift, and it's a sign that still sits in my kitchen that says, a good coach can change a game. A great coach can change a life.
I feel like there would be like a jump off quote from that. Like a good player is someone who plays the game. A great player is the one who beats the game.
From the player perspective, what I think goes in line with that same quote is do what's right when no one's looking, right? So some of the best, we were talking before about baseball, about sometimes how slow it is, and it doesn't mean you don't have to move, right? And some of the best coached players are the ones who are hustling and doing things when they're not expecting to get the ball, right? The right fielder coming in to back up first base, knowing where to be at the right time, even the catcher hustling down. A quick story, a good friend of mine who's an exceptional baseball coach, and he teaches, his livelihood is baseball instruction. They're in the second game of a doubleheader in they were playing 7-inning games. It's like the top of the seventh. They didn't have another catcher at this tournament, so he's now had to catch both games, which in the middle of the summer when it's 90 plus degrees and you're wearing all that gear for 2 straight games, it's exhausting. And they're up a bunch in this game, right? Up a bunch. And the easy thing to do would have been, Evan was this kid's name. Easy thing for Evan to do when a ground ball was hit and there's 2 outs, they have 1 more out to go. The easy thing for a routine ground ball was for him just to sit back at home plate and just let the final out go and get in the dugout and cool off and so forth. That kid busted his butt all the way down the first base line to back up the throw because that's how he was taught and that's how he knew how to play the game, right? Those are the things. You're not watching for the kid to make the sexy play, right? To turn to make a diving catch, to turn the not routine double play, right? To hit the home run. You're watching to see what that kid does, right? Because those are the kids that have been most impacted by what you poured into them.
Or even like fishermen, even when it's low tide and they can't go out to sea, they're mending their nets, they're repairing their boats, they're getting things ready so that when they do have to go, everything is where they need to. Because I think the best thing about, or the most educational part of having a boat, having a ship, is that everything you need is on that ship. You're not going to cut the rope on your ship because now you have too shorter amount of rope. You just repurpose everything. Everything, your entire livelihood is on that boat. You can't go to port. It's going to take a while to get there. So you don't reduce your resources. You just build on what you already have.
Yeah. Going back to the sports analogies, right? I mean, you look at some of the greatest of all time, right? The Michael Jordans, the Kobe Bryants, the Derek Jeter. I mean, people that are known for their preparation, known for being up earlier and working before anybody's willing to get up, staying behind and working after games are over, especially if they lost, right? It's such a competitive landscape that to set yourself apart, it takes more than just being the best athlete or the smartest X, Y, you know what I mean? You have to be able to practice and work harder than everyone, right? And that's a discipline. That's a mindset.
I think it was on one of the podcasts I was watching. They were talking about this one guy was talking about how he was visiting a tennis match or something, and there was five of the greatest tennis players on the court. They were all just warming up and everything, and each tennis player had their own way of warming up. One would be highly disciplined, focused about what he was doing. Others would be chatting with girls. Another one would be laughing his head off or something. They all had their own personalities, but they were the best at what they did. So it doesn't really matter. There's no one way to get to somewhere. There's many different ways. Some might be a little longer, but they all get to. There is a straight and narrow path, but there's also a lot of different ways of getting to that point.
And the only way to measure success, I mean, there have to be achievable goals along the way, and then there has to be the lofty goal, right? So if, what I think what often is missed is, okay, well, we want to win the World Series. Okay, great. So, well, what's it going to take for us to do that, right? We've got to win. We probably got to win 90 to 100 games during the regular season to make the playoffs. And then we're going to have to win 3 out of 5 games the first series, 4 out of 7 games the next 2 series to get to the World Series, right? So what do we have to do with any components, or what do we need in terms of pitching? What do we need to, where are we missing? But I think too often where people fail is, the goal is, okay, well, I'm going to close $100 million in business this year. That's great. That would be exceptional. How are you going to get there? And as you do your planning to get there, work, sports, being a better musician, being a better whatever, right? Being a better Christian for me, right? What do I have to do daily? If my goal is, to be a better version of myself, which includes my spirituality, right? What do I need to do daily to get there? And what things do I need to recognize as achievements? That's so important, right? Because we can be trying to get to here and start here, and we don't recognize all the great things we've done, but don't quite hit that. And then we look at it as a failure. We look at it as a total failure. Well, is it? Right? I mean, look at all the things we achieved here, and we take those successes. We're still striving for that goal. Now how do we improve all the things in here? Right? I think a lot of people miss that. Right? They miss they focus on the big picture, and I think that's a part of that's a function. Some of that's a generational thing. I think we as a society has lost to some degree our work ethic. I think technology and instant gratification and success has in many ways pushed people to not work as hard.
I mean, yeah, I would agree that there is instant gratification, but I think there was maybe a lack of knowledge or lack of awareness when technology started ramping up as quickly as it did, especially like when the iPhone came out and everything started becoming smaller, more efficient, faster, is that technology itself is a tool. Like first and foremost, it's a tool. It's you go to Home Depot, you don't get a hammer for what you could use for a shovel.
Right.
You buy things to make your life more efficient, but not so that you become lazy, but because you can get more done in the same amount of time. And one thing about technology is that on one hand, yes, there's social media. You have the algorithms that are almost like psychologically perfect. Like the social engineering behind that is absolutely insane. You keep someone hooked on the platform for hours and they don't even realize it. And that's like that dopamine high, that serotonin high. It's like puppies, girls, like you can get everything that you
Right.
want. If you can make your life so efficient, so productive, and be that much more efficient than everyone else, why not?
Do we have, to your point, if we're using that tool to help ourselves, and we've had technology even in the mortgage business and so forth, right, that does help us identify opportunities with past clients or follow the market, give meaningful information and data to our client and referral base and so forth. That's all, I love all that, right? And it's also the way we need to reach people, because us old people don't, we're not necessarily on the forefront of technology, so we certainly have to use some degree of technology, because that's how the next generation of home buyers and so forth are absorbing and looking for information, right? The Zillows and realtors of the world. And now where else can almost all home searches now happen on the web. People aren't just driving around neighborhoods like they used to, right? So I 1,000% agree. I think using technology as a tool to be more efficient is a great thing. Is it necessarily helping people be more productive? Or in other words, are using that time and energy and efficiency that you gained from what you've been provided as a result of the use of that technology into something that helps you be a better, stronger, faster, more productive?
I think that would have to do with intention. If someone has a tool and they intend to use a shovel for a hammer, then they have misguided intentions. They're just wasting time. That would be the lack of productivity. But if they use a shovel for what they need to do, they're not going to carry that shovel around for the rest of the day. They're going to put it somewhere where it doesn't get rusty and everything. But it's like there's a time where you use your phone for productive means, but essentially it's still a tool. But the ease, the convenience of being able to just go on your phone, pop into an app and doom scroll for the next 30, 40 minutes, that's where the productivity becomes more of being counterproductive. If there's anything I hate, I would rather be not very efficient than being counterproductive.
Yeah. And where do you see the defining line between the two?
What do you mean by that?
So like how do you define inefficiency versus counterproductivity?
It's a good question.
That's why I asked it.
I know. Inefficiency over it's kind of like you can take a bike to go from A to B, or you can take a car to go from A to B. A car requires a lot more maintenance, a lot more back end things, like you need to get the oil change, you need to fill it up with gas, or if it's electric, now you have to plug it in every single time you go home. But being counterproductive is going the other way. Is I want to go to A to B, so let me go to A to C to D to E, and then I'll go to B. But I had no reason to go that way. So it's like if I have to go on a bike, that's a lot more efficient than walking. but I'm still going in the direction, in the way that I believe is the most important. It's like velocity. It's speed and direction.
Yeah.
You can go you can go really quickly, but if you're going in the wrong direction, that's going to be a problem. But at least you have something. At least velocity has a positive component. You're not going against going the way that it's not supposed to be going.
I look at it the same way. I mean, I look at, being inefficient isn't keeping you from moving forward. It's probably just keeping you from moving forward faster, right? But if I'm doing things that are counterproductive, then things have turned in a different direction, right? I might actually be losing opportunities or losing business.
We said we were going to talk about Skull Games a little bit.
You mentioned Flags of Valor earlier. One of my best friends now is, when Flags of Valor was very early on in their, well, we'll talk about it, but
I think you start with Flags of Valor and we can go into Skull Games.
Yeah. Kind of the giving back aspect of my life and so forth. Okay.
It's my responsibility to edit all of it.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll figure out the best way to do it.
That's fair. Okay. I think personally that, having a heart for giving back is important. I saw in a local publication, I think it was like an Ashburn Gazette or something like that, I saw an ad for a relatively new company called Flags of Valor, and they were Ashburn based. And the advertisement was really cool. They're making these really awesome, what they would call wooden American wall art, right? Making these really cool custom wooden flags. And the first thing I thought was, well, I really want one of those, but I want to find out what they're all about because they're local. I do care about the military. Maybe this is a way I can see what they're doing and so forth. So I reached out to a guy. I got connected to a guy by the name of Mike Taylor. Mike is now a very close personal friend of mine. But at the time, Mike was the only non-veteran working at Flags of Valor, except for maybe their receptionist, I think. And Mike was kind of like running sales and business development for the company. Again, very early in their livelihood. Mike agreed to take a meeting, and I went out and saw their first Ashburn shop, tiny little shop. They're actually making flags there. And so I sat down with Mike and I said, "Tell me, what are the pillars of the organization? Like what's the foundation here? Why does Flags of Valor do what they do?" And he said, "It's very simple." He said, we build beautiful, wooden American themed flags, wall art. We call it wall art, right? We only use materials made in America, and the only people who can actually build the flags are combat veterans. I'm like taken back by that. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, so I said, let me get this right. You hire combat veterans so that you can make beautiful American-made wall art. I just think about Mike saying this. I can just hear him say this. He goes, "You got it all wrong." And I'm repeating what you just told me. Like, how do I have it wrong? He said, "You just said that we hire combat veterans so that we can make beautiful wooden American wall art." He said, that's 1,000% wrong. We make beautiful wooden American wall art so that we can hire combat veterans. And I was like, I don't know if I was bawling, but I was like emotional. That's awesome. Like your purpose, your mission, Brian, who's the founder and CEO of the company, still is, like, that's like your purpose is clear, right? You have started this business to be able to employ, it does it, whatever the widget is. You're making flags, you're building chairs, you're making a microphone, whatever, right? What they make is awesome, but that didn't matter. At least to me, it didn't matter. And Mike almost kind of made me think like, it doesn't matter what we build. We want to turn a profit. We want to have a successful business, but we're doing it for this purpose. Mm-hmm. So Mike and another mutual friend of ours, Phil, the three of us are very close, started kind of working together to start doing different things, predominantly in the charity golf tournament world, to try to support nonprofits that we cared about. A couple of years ago, Mike got introduced to a guy by the name of Kevin Metcalf, who is very respected in the human trafficking world. And we had a couple conference calls, and we had Zoom calls and so forth. And Mike and Phil and I said, listen, we want to put on a high-end charity golf tournament to raise money for your organization. And Kevin said, very honestly, which I fully respect, we don't have the resources. We're not ready for that kind of thing yet. but do you know Jeff Teagues? We said, no. Well, I'm going to introduce you to Jeff Teagues. He's the founder and CEO of Skull Games. Well, that'd be great. So we got introduced to Jeff. Eventually had lunch with Jeff and his team, Ty Canner, Joe Scaramucci, who are all like important. Like they're head of law enforcement. They're at the time certainly the main players in the organization. Had lunch with them to find out a little bit more about what they do, what their passions are, and so forth. And they're just an awesome organization. And they have clearly defined what it is they want to do, right? They are providing using open source intelligence and providing real, meaningful information and data to law enforcement to help in the fight against human trafficking. I didn't know, at the time, I didn't think that this was something that was going to be necessary to like hit a hot button with me, right? Make-A-Wish did it in a certain way, and the things that were important to Flags of Valor when we were doing that kind of stuff, it's all important stuff. But, I have 2 daughters, right? And I know one's 28, the other one's 19. But there's no age limit, right? And when you start to dig a little bit deeper and hear from people whose life is now dedicated to that war, and find out what's really going on to the degree that I can know that, right? And really find out what's going on in that horrible, horrible world. You start to get a little interested in seeing what you can do to help out, right? I'm not in law enforcement. I'm not, Jeff's a former, military badass, right? I mean, he's, Delta Force commander. He's seen it all on the battlefield. He is a, God-loving, God-fearing Christian. He's written an amazing book called Where Have All the Heroes Gone, which is a fantastic read if you haven't read it. It's a kind of an intercession of his faith and some biblical stories coupled with military stories and his experience and kind of how those things come together, which is pretty awesome. Brazilian black belt, right? I mean, he's done a lot. Not a guy I'm going to mess with, but is passionate about fighting this fight. And when you sit down, this is what's awesome about sitting down and meeting with people who do the kind of things that Jeff and his team do, is finding out about the human being, right? Finding out about the meaning and the purpose behind all this. And it's fascinating, right? It's horrible, but it's fascinating.
I was looking in the Protect Your Family course that they have. Jeff gave me a coupon code so I could watch it for free. There was the one story with Sarah Jane Vegas, which was, I don't know why that's not on YouTube. Like that would be it's a very like emotional story, and it was 30 minutes long, but it felt like 2 hours just because there's so much detail in her story. She was a survivor of of a sex trafficking. I don't know if it was a ring or just she was in that world in Europe, and it was a lot. Like I wasn't crying or anything, but like internally it was just a lot.
Tear you up.
It's a lot to take in. And throughout the entire course that I was watching, which you guys really need to get the audio better on that. the audio. Are
you talking to Skull Games?
Yeah, I'm talking to Skull Games. You guys need to get that audio better, which isn't that hard to do. But other than that, the one thing that I kind of like a recurring message I heard throughout all the 8 courses that they have, 8 modules, is that there's no human side to human trafficking. Like they call it human trafficking. There's no humanity in that. There's no human. It's just a bunch of people who don't know how to be human, and it's
a business. It's a massive business with complete disregard to humanity whatsoever. And the whole premise, as I understand it, behind, I mean, their logo's badass. But the whole premise behind Skull Games is there was a very in their world, there was a very well-known pimp, right? Basically, that was known for saying, the world, our world of pimping and prostitution and trafficking and so forth is not about about overtaking the physical body of somebody. It's about the mind, right? It's about, and it is a slow burn, right? It's a slow grind. Typically it's actually through technology, right? In many cases that they're getting a hold of these victims and slowly changing their mindset and slowly building trust.
Yeah,
and
just a psychological grooming.
That's exactly what it is. And therein lies the name Skull Games.
It's not a sex game.
It's a skull game. Yeah.
The more I've like 1,000 questions I want to ask him. When he comes out in June for the event, and it's kind of, on one hand, it's really admirable what they're doing, because I never heard about it. I knew that sex trafficking was a thing, but I'm almost 21. I don't know anything about sex trafficking. And then I read about the course, and now I just want to go into it. And on one hand, it's really cool what they're doing, but on the other hand, it kind of makes sense why not many people either want to listen about it or want to talk about it, because it's kind of like what we talked about before. When you're not really informed about something, it can be really scary. But at other time, when you know everything about it, it's like, what can I do about it? And some people, like, I've talked to a lot of people here at XCal about it, and they don't know what Skull Games is, or they don't know that there are organizations out there that are trying to do it. And I think in my opinion, based on what I've watched and what I've read from the various materials that they have, is that the biggest bottleneck that they have is, or one of the bottlenecks is, that they're using open source intelligence. They're using stuff that you can find publicly available information, because that's what law enforcement can use. Like the probable cause part of law enforcement is that you need probable cause. You can't use stuff that have to be like illegally obtained information, because that won't hold up in court. And that's a really hard part. It's finding that stuff that's publicly available on channels that are easy to access, because there'll be private, like, Facebook groups. There might be private like Snapchat stories or something like that. Stuff that's like, you can't do it unless you're in that circle.
Part, I think, of the challenge forget about a global perspective, just a national perspective, is, what the first part about solving a problem is being able to identify that you have one, right? So I think the problem, until it continues to be, until there's a greater sense of urgency presented with it on a national scale, most people either don't know about it, ignore it. It's not a priority for them. It's not in their backyard, but yet it is in their backyard, because there's a massive, the greatest percentage and increase of trafficking is happening here in the United States, right? So, one of the things that I'm really hopeful that they create, to whatever degree we're able to help them, in the smallest way possible, is creating awareness, right? One of the things that we'll be doing in June, coupled with the event that's happening here at XCal, which is pretty awesome, and people get to come and pew and shoot a bunch of fun stuff and all that, and get some self-defense training from Dave, and this will be our 4th year here, which is pretty awesome. But there's going to be an extra piece of that, which is going to be a situational awareness training. Capacity and their ability to do this in the field is limited, right? But our goal is to take even up to 24 young, girls of teenage years and so forth in the field, right? And there's so much that I'm really, I think, in a way, kind of excited that Skull Games will help communities start to understand is, what should I do if I see ... right? What should I be on the look? Our day-to-day stuff, like we pull up at the gas station and fill up our tank and don't pay attention to our surroundings, right? We could be in the grocery store. We could be at the ATM machine. There are things happening that we don't even know are happening right next to us.
There's also that one, I don't know if it was a quote or just a phrase, out of sight, out of mind. If you don't see it, you don't know it exists. It's not like you can see someone being a professional, like a jiu-jitsu black belt. You can see them in action on the TV, but seeing it in front of you is a whole different experience. And it's funny how, like, Ashburn, as rich as it is with all the amount of people, like Loudoun County is one of the richest counties in the country. it wouldn't be that hard for someone to do a drug deal here out in the open. Just have a decent looking car, don't dress funny, and you can do a drug deal in the parking lot of a neighborhood and no one would bat an eye.
There's no question it's happening. We also live in a time when you talk about out of sight, out of mind, right? There's a lot of reasons why we don't get involved in things. It hasn't impacted me personally, right? Where some of the greatest impacts in the nonprofit world have happened because people started to raise money and awareness because something happened to them personally, right? To their family. So hasn't happened to me personally. I don't have time. I don't have the energy. I'm lazy. Whatever the case might be. It's just sheer purposeful ignorance. And I say that because there's a difference between ignorance and purposeful ignorance. Ignorance is just a lack of understanding. Purposeful ignorance is I am going to almost go out of my way to ignore it, right? Because I don't want to hear about it. Because if I hear about it, I'm going to feel sad about it. I'm going to feel sad about this story. I'm going to feel sad about what have you. And then I'm going to take zero action, And listen, that's not, everybody has the ability to give one or more of what we call the 3 T's, right? Time, talent, and treasure, right? If all you want to do is write a damn check, right? If you have time to give and serve on a board or get on the highway and pick up trash, right? Or whatever the case might be, fine. Right? If you have a gift, right? I mean, I know there are people that are musicians that go to Children's Hospital and play for kids in the whatever. Just give something, right? And we just certainly here, right? How do we not have the ability? How do most people here not have the ability to do at least one, if not 2 of the 3?
The opposite of love is not hate; it's indifference. The opposite of attention is not lack of attention, it's avoidance. If you avoid something, you put your attention towards it, but you're intentionally not putting your attention on it. And it's like there's also situations where people don't have the time for it. They have a family to raise, they have things to do, they have things out of their balance. And that's kind of going back to what we said earlier about if I can make my life so efficient or so productive that I can do things outside of if I'm able to get this up and running to a point where I have multiple editors, where I have people who can do the work for me, that I just have to do the production and then I can do other things that I find valuable, then it's like you get the more and more you learn, the more and more you become more efficient, make your life better. You can help other people be better, but in my mind, I have to make my life better first.
Sure. And
then from there, I'll have the money, I'll have maybe the influence. I don't really care about that, but I'll have more resources behind what I'm doing so that it's not that I can just give my time. I can give my time, my resources, my attention, and hopefully at that point, my expertise in whatever I know, that it's not just like I could do something now really well. Like I can help Skull Games. I can do what I can, or if I wait a little bit longer, I can give them more.
Okay, but what you're doing now is helping them, right? If 5,000 people watch this interview, right, that's helping them. It doesn't have to be a direct impact.
Yeah, I can do the most with what I've got.
No question. To your point about improving yourself or being the best version of yourself before you try to, to help, others. It's why they tell you to put on your own oxygen mask in the plane before you put on somebody else's, right? I mean, I agree that we certainly, we're not going to be perfect, right? I'm not sure that we need to get to a certain point before we make a point to try to help. I think there should be some component of the makeup of you, not just you, I'm saying you as the general, right? That should have a heart for giving back, right? And people don't know where to start, right? They may not have identified something that's a passion for them, right? They may not have had they may not have taken the step to reach out to an organization and say, who can I meet with to tell me about what you do? And guess what? If that doesn't resonate, move on to the next one. Don't give up and just say, okay, well, I reached out to Jeff and we had a meeting, and you know what I mean? Because if Skull Games didn't resonate, there's kind of that, to me, this both the spiritual thing and kind of that kinesthetic thing I was talking about learning about how Skull Games operates. When I left that lunch, it meant something to me. and it also meant something to the people, my close friends who are also, we're collectively looking like, what can we get into next? What can we get into next? Do it with someone, right? You're so much more likely to jump into something. Like even if it's at your local church and you're just going to, to fill boxes of food, right? Just go do it, and do it with a group.
So I'll probably rephrase what I was saying earlier. Instead of like, give whatever value you can give now, yes. the most effective, most efficient value that you can now without hurting yourself in the process. Okay. Like if you can go to your church and you can help out, and it doesn't take, and it's like 2 hours of your time, and you're not already doing anything that day. Not only is that helping them, but it's also helping you, because your mind will now be tuned to being more productive during that time.
Let me give you another example.
Yeah.
It's Christmas time, right? And you realize that, okay, I don't know who to help, where to help, but I know there are probably families in this area who can't afford to do anything for their family for Christmas. Okay. So, what could I afford to spend? Because I just don't want to write a $50 check or $100 check to a local organization and hope that they make a difference, right? But maybe some of these local organizations, your local churches, the whoever, right? The food bank. There are a lot of really good local nonprofits who are helping families in need. Maybe there are families in the area who've reached out directly to those organizations and said, listen, I can't celebrate Christmas with my family this year, and here's what I need, right? Pajamas, socks, right? Not like Xboxes or things like that, but I mean, if can I not go out to lunch twice this month, maybe, and go buy a bunch of things for a family who have clearly indicated what they need, and bring it to that organization? Sure, I can. Right? So I say all that because it doesn't have. We often confuse or make the mistake of determining what value or something meaningful might be to someone else because of what we deem meaningful. We have everything, right? I would never ask somebody for a pair of pajamas. I'll just go out and buy a pair of pajamas, right? But you have to take that step, because it's amazing what you'll find if you actually look.
And there's one saying: if you're spending money on yourself, then you're going to be very frugal. If you spend money on other people, then you're going to be more generous. If you're spending someone else's money on yourself, you're going to be more generous. And then if you're spending other people's money on other people, you have a government. Obviously not going to go into like the political side of things, but it's funny how much kind of like what we started with, like you can get a lot of happiness, a lot of joy from helping other people, so long as you're not hurting yourself in the process. And
it feels different. If I buy something for my kids at Christmas, there's a temporary happiness of them opening a present and go, oh, that's what I wanted. That, you know what I mean? When you give to people in need and know that you've made an impact that way, there's that happiness and joy comparison again. It's a different feeling, right? And honestly, I don't know why I don't do it every day, because it is an unparalleled feeling, right? It's
something that I do whenever I'm like looking for a present to give to someone. I don't just try to find a present. Try to find something that matches who they are. So like I might get like a friend of mine. She likes golf. I was at the Virginia Museum of Art, and I was just looking around to see what they have, and I saw this one golf thing. And I was like, hey, she might like that, because it's like this will be something that would be relevant to what they do. So it's not just providing something, it's providing maybe some value over time, that every time they see it, they'll go back to it. Like let's say I got a pen, I could get 1,000 of the same cheap pens, or I can get something that may be a little bit different, that like every time I use it, it's just like a little fun to play around with. Something that's like, it's not just the present, it's not just the act of giving, it's giving value.
The key is giving without any expectation of anything in return, right? I hope, well, in the sense of like buying gifts anonymously and giving them to, a family in need, I hope they don't know who I am. I'm giving because I want them to have it, right? In the business world, it's a little bit different, because I want, if I give something with my logo on it, you give them that because you want them to think of you every time that they use it, right? So it's a little different. But that's really in terms of the things that we want to do to help an organization like Skull Games, is giving without expectation, right? It's just what can we do to help you take your organization to the next level? Because what you're doing is changing lives, saving lives, right? That's purposeful.
They find the people in need. They help them rehabilitation, or they help them get their life
back to normal society, real.
And then some of them turn into hunters, into people hunting the predators, and that's the fascinating part. It's like you take someone who was a victim, and then they get and build the courage so they can start doing the same thing for. And the best part is that, well, I don't know if it's the best part, but one aspect to that is that they, with that knowledge of all the small little things that they might not want to tell anyone, because you have three different people. Everyone has like the public self, the private self, and the core self. The public self is the one that they show to everyone. The private self is they show to close friends or family, and the core self is the one they don't show to anyone else. And it's funny, like, it maybe, I don't know if like underscores it, but just the ability to have all those memories, all those different things that hurt them. Now they can identify that when they're doing that public, the open sourced intelligence.
How brilliant is that? Who is more likely to give 1,000% of themselves to help the next person not be trafficked than someone who was, right? I mean, when you've been through something horrific or something, even just think like, if I didn't know where my next meal was coming from and I was fed, how much more encouraged am I going to be having known that feeling to help keep somebody else from being hungry? I mean, that's brilliant.
Yeah. It's like one of the things my dad always reference is that I won't ever really appreciate everything that I have because I grew up with running water. I grew up with an oven in the kitchen with a refrigerator. I can put ice cream in there and eat it whenever I want. Well, not whenever I want, but
you probably can.
I probably could have, but it's hard to really appreciate and have the gratitude of everything around me if I haven't experienced what it's like to have nothing.
Yeah, that's right.
I think a lot of the self-made millionaires and billionaires, the people who really made a lot of money, came from not so wealthy beginnings. Like don't quote me on it, but like 5% of all the self-made millionaires actually got it from like inheritance.
Yeah, because you know what? Well, yeah, you know why the other 95% were successful? Because they weren't afraid to fail, right? They had nothing to. They didn't come from something so cushy, right? And that they couldn't. They had nothing to give up. They might have invested a little bit of money to take the next step, but their experience was, I have nothing to lose.
Not the most fun thing to think about, that every day you have to live it with knowing that you have to be uncomfortable.
True. But I think what we're missing, especially around here, like, we don't have to give anything up meaningful. All the wonderful things we have and the comfortable lives we live and the ice cream in the fridge every day and all that kind of, we don't have to give any of that stuff up to make a difference to somebody else. We just have to be willing to seek it out.
There's 4 people you have to forgive in life. There's your parents, living or dead, for every mistake they ever made in bringing you up. There's the second people, the people from marriages or relationships that didn't work out. You have to forgive everyone else in your life who has ever hurt you in any way. And the fourth and final person is yourself. Is there any way that you apply that to, like, looking back on your life, is there any way that you apply that to, or you're able to like kind of relate to that?
So, I have, 4 amazing children, right? From 28 to 19. I had a failed marriage. A lot of things, you look back on in hindsight, a large part of that failure. I mean, no one person's responsible for the failure of any, for a relationship, right? I certainly had my part in why that relationship broke down. And so, through the process of, pretty lengthy marriage ending, and also trying to reconcile those challenges or deal with those challenges, that how that's impacted your kids and your family and so forth. That was about the time where, and this is an interesting segue, where my spiritual life really started to take off. And I was struggling. I was struggling with forgiving, being forgiven, forgiving myself, And I say all that because when you're talking about forgiveness, the hardest thing that I had to deal with, I thought, what really was the forgiveness of self. And it was made very clear to me that, based on my belief system, that I was already forgiven. You should go ask for forgiveness from the person that, for your role in the dissolution of this relationship. You should ask for forgiveness for your role in the breakdown of that, which I did. But it was also made clear to me, you may not get it. You may not get what you're looking for, but that's okay, because your heart is moved in the right direction. Even though now I know I don't need to beat myself up about it, sometimes I still do, because of the impact that event, for lack of a better word, what the ripple effect of that was to people that you care about.
Yeah. What about, I don't know if this is the best word, but what about closure? Like having, maybe on the emotional side, just you're trying to forgive yourself, you're maybe trying to forgive someone else, but like you said, that sometimes when you're talking to that person, you don't get what you're looking for. You're not getting that, like the closure of either the relationship or that conversation, or something that's like, there's still something I want to say or something I want to get from them. How do you deal with that lack of closure?
Well, there's just some things you may never get, and that's okay, right? Because what I have learned is, I may not get what I want. I've had in different closures. I mean, both my parents are gone, right? So I've had, you have to deal with the closure of things maybe you wish you would have said or did, or experienced maybe you wish you would have had and didn't, and so forth. You can't beat yourself up about that, right? You have to accept that if you've done what you can do to get the closure you're hoping for, but the answer or lack of answer in what you're seeking doesn't give you 100% closure, well, then you have it. You have closure. It's just not maybe exactly the way you hoped it would have worked out.
So it's not the glass is half full or half empty. It's just fill it up with something new, something that gives you that fulfillment.
Yeah. I mean, or you know what? Or get a new glass.
Is there any way that you try to seek out the joy over the temporary happiness?
Going back to the discipline question, right? My daily discipline throughout in my job, in my career, and the success that I'm able to achieve as a result of that, provides me the opportunity to seek joy, right? So now I have flexibility that, whatever degree of financial flexibility I have, right? But I can do things with people that I care about, that are joyful. I can spend time, getting back on the baseball field, which will give me joy. I can spend time with the kids. I can pour into an organization like Skull Games and try to build something that's meaningful to them. Those are things that bring joy. The happiness is the day-to-day stuff, right? A successful client closing. I mean, the life's transactions, the good life's transactions are happy things. My daughter's getting married at the end of April. That's joy, right? All the little, getting together for dinner and talking about her planning, and then she's got her flowers done and all this kind of stuff. That's happy. It's all that will culminate into something joyful.
What about the emotional attachment conflict? Like when you have maybe just a downtime, or like you're not as happy as you usually are, and you go to something that you are happy with to get you back up. Is there do you try to separate that attachment, that this is something that I love to do and I'm coming in with a not so happy attitude? And then every time you go back into that, you have that, like, it's starting to sap away the happiness that you get, that joy that you get from going to that original thing.
You try to disassociate those things as quickly as you can. It's late in the day and I just had a not so happy interaction with someone, right? A referral partner's bothered by something, a client's upset about, whatever. I mean, those things happen, right? And then my daughter calls on FaceTime from school, right? Like, oh, okay. Now, I always want to take her call when she calls. So pushing that down, I'm, as I mentioned before, I'm good at pushing things down when I'm not, when something is bothering me. But to try to flip those emotions and not pour into her based on, using that example, I don't want to pour into her because in a negative way, because at the end of the day, what I know, and I think it's subconscious, none of that, nothing that happens in my day to day, is negative enough. It doesn't matter, right? I'll go on to tomorrow. I'll go on. I'll be over that in 15 minutes.
So you've gotten to the point where you can easily just let go of whatever it is. Just not even like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, just instantly let go of something. And then I guess kind of what Dave talked about, just set aside for later. Like you can deal with it later.
I'll deal with it as long as it's something that's not emergent. That is something that is hard. It is hard for me to do. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's something I've learned to do because I'm the guy who, like, if you were to ask if you're gonna ask friends of mine, people who know me the closest, like, okay, what's Mark's OCD? I hate seeing badges on my phone. Like the hardest thing for me to do is look and see I have a text or an email and not check it, just to clear it. And if it's something that needs a response, particularly if it's work related, I'll want to respond to it. Well, the problem with that is I now create an expectation for people who I'm responding to that I'm available at any time, at any day, right? That's something I'm still working to try to overcome because that really impacts that kind of work life.
Then would you add the honesty to that? That like, yes, sometimes you'll get an instant message from me. Other times it will be maybe 2 hours.
If the response is, well, I realize it's 9:00 on a Monday night, but I need the answer now, then I have to be okay with the response that may be, well, unfortunately, I can't do that for you. And if you need to find somebody else, that's perfectly fine, right? I have to be willing to let that go because the deal's not worth it, right? And what you tend to find is people in general who have those type of demands from the very beginning, what do they say, like the 80-20 rule, like you'll spend 80% of your time on 20% of your clients.
It's almost like in order to give someone a lot of value, give clients, relationships, family, God, in church, is that time delay. On one hand, you need to give it value for the people that it's involved, but on the other hand, you also give it yourself.
I look at that the same way as I do, with relationships outside of work, right? How am I creating value in relationships with friends, family, nonprofits, and so forth? Am I giving the best version of myself to improve the lives of the people that I care about, the people that I interact with, right? And then I don't know what the measure of that improvement is, right? Are they happy to be around me? Are my kids better off today than they were yesterday?
I think that's probably the worst part of anything is that you won't be able to see the results now. You plant the seed today, you don't know if that tree is going to grow up or it's going to die off early on. You just have to wait and see, or at least in my opinion, you just have to.
No, you're right, particularly your kids, because they're the ones you have the ability to have the biggest influence on. They'll do something, say something, maybe even employ something in their daily life that you're pretty confident is a result of something that you've encouraged them to do.
What about the times when your kids do something that you never taught them? And it's like, it's either a good thing or a bad thing, or both things. If it's a good thing but you never taught them, or it's a bad thing and you never taught them, how do you approach both situations?
You hope that they are surrounding themselves with other good people to keep them from doing the bad things and to hopefully help them be better rounded people to teach them good things that maybe I never did. The bad things are tough because, this goes back to the failure part of it. Again, they are going to make mistakes. I mean, there are certainly things that have happened, decisions, relationships, failed relationships over the years. I could look at my oldest daughter, for instance, before she found her fiance and be like, what did you see in that guy? I mean, there's nothing redeemable about this person. Like, what were you thinking? Right. But they have to go down a path, and they have to go down that path and let those things happen so they don't happen again. As long as they're not life-threatening or would potentially hurt or damage somebody or something else, it's all okay. Cause in that example, she's better as a result of it.
Yeah. So you don't shape your kids to be replicas of you. You shape them to become people who will be self-sustainable.
Oh goodness, I don't want them to be replicas of me. I that's the whole thing, going back to the Oscar Wilde quote, right? I want them all to be themselves, and they all have their own unique personalities. I want them to have hopefully learned from my mistakes as well as their own, become better as a result of it, know the things that they don't want, that good and bad from both their mom and dad, that they can pull into their own lives and say, okay, I want to be like dad because of these things. I don't want to be like dad because of these things, right? They will. I mean, all four of them will be way better versions of themselves than I could have ever been of myself.
Cool. I think we covered mostly everything. Is there anything you wanted to talk about? Anything you wanted to cover?
No. I mean, I think we got a good bit covered there.
I guess two questions. One thing you want to tell to your kids, either your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids, when you're dead and everything, your old bones in their casket. What do you want to tell to them? And then what's something you would have told to yourself 30 years ago, 20 years ago?
Wow. There are certain decisions I make very quickly, right? I tend to make car buying decisions very quickly. I tend to, because of my natural nature, to want things off my plate. If there's something challenging, I want to find the answer. I want to solve it. And I want to get it off my plate and move on, and so forth. I just wish, I would have had the ability just to sit back, sometimes let things happen, be more patient about some things.
Be patient, but not stagnant.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, no, I can't, I can sit for a while, but I can't be stagnant. What do I want my kids and grandkids?
Great grandkids, great grandkids, the ones you'll never see.
Because my spiritual journey has become the biggest, most important, probably impact or change in my life, that I can only just pray that they follow the same direction. Just let God. So when they're going through difficult things, there's somebody I've known for a long time. He's also a very big believer. And he said, whenever I'm going through something difficult, a challenge at work, a challenge at home, what have you, and I'm really struggling and so forth, he said, I'm going to give it everything I have to make it better. And then I'm going to let God do the other 100%. So, I just want, I hope generations beyond me, just trust in him from as early in their life as possible. That's all I got.
Sounds good.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Microphone.
Oh, still recording. Good.
Oh, I was going to kill you if that wasn't the case.